I was the last one left. The hall had emptied hours ago, the torches burned low, and the scent of wolf musk and dying flowers clung to the air like an omen. Every other girl chosen for this season's royal selection had already been claimed, escorted away with trembling hope or brittle pride. Only I remained, sitting stiffly on a wooden bench with my gloved hands tucked into my lap, pretending I didn't hear the whispers circling me like vultures. "Cursed," someone murmured behind a pillar. "Unfit," hissed another. Their voices lowered when I glanced up, but the damage was already done. I felt each word settle onto the fabric of my veil the way ash settles onto snow, tainting everything it touches. I drew the sheer cloth down over the bridge of my nose, even though it was already in place, already hiding the scars I never asked for. The world had decided long ago that my face was something to fear, something to hide, something a man, human or shifter, should never have to wake up next to. I had never been told these things directly, not at first. They had always come in pieces, soft enough to sound like kindness. "You look better covered, my dear. It will make things easier if no one sees. Some men have weak hearts. We don't want to frighten them." By the time I turned 16, no one bothered cushioning the truth anymore, especially not my aunt. She stood across the room now, arms crossed tightly over her expensive gown, looking at me as though my very presence was an inconvenience. "Be grateful if anyone takes you," she said earlier, when I tried to sit near the other girls. "A girl like you doesn't get to be picky. A girl like me." It wasn't the scars alone. They were old, pale, and jagged, but no longer grotesque. It was everything they symbolized. I had survived something I shouldn't have, something most humans never returned from. And instead of celebrating survival, the world had found it more convenient to call it impurity. The shifters viewed me as touched by a predator's teeth. The humans viewed me as tainted by an enemy's claws. And so I sat here, the last bride no one wanted. I folded my hands until my knuckles ached. My heartbeat was embarrassingly loud. It echoed in the hollow space inside me, the place where hope had once lived. The last noble guardian left on duty finally glanced my way. His expression twisted briefly, almost apologetic, as if he pitied me, as if pity made any difference. I wanted to rage, cry, demand someone ask me what I wanted. Instead, I sat very still, letting the weight of rejection sink deeper into my bones, turning heavy and familiar. It wasn't new. It was just louder here, in this place carved of marble and polished power, this place where alliances were forged, where beauty was currency, and where the veil over my face announced my worth before I ever spoke. The doors creaked open again. Not for me. Never for me. But the way the guardians snapped upright, the way their eyes lifted and their chests expanded in involuntary submission, told me the newcomer wasn't someone I could ignore. Heavy bootsteps echoed across the marble floor. Slow, purposeful, unhurried in a way only someone supremely powerful could manage. Whispers rippled like wind across water. "Alpha King?" He came himself? Why now? I froze. The Alpha King? But the selection was over. The brides had already been chosen. Even I knew he was far too important to bother with the leftovers. Still, the steps kept coming. Closer. Closer. My breath trapped painfully in my chest as a shadow fell across the floor in front of me, tall, broad-shouldered, unmistakably dominant. I could feel the weight of him even without looking up. Something ancient inside me stirred. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. Slowly, I lifted my gaze. The Alpha King stood before me, not before the line of selected brides, not before the courtyard, not before the high-born families, before me. His eyes, wolf-bright even in human form, locked onto mine through the thin veil. No flicker of disgust, no flinch, no sign of the disappointment I had learned to brace myself for. He studied me with a stillness that stole air from my lungs. Whispers started again, frantic this time. Why her? He can't mean the rejected one? But the king didn't look away. He extended his hand. Rise, he said, voice deep enough to reverberate in my ribs. You will come with me. I could only stare. This had to be a mistake. A trick. A cruel joke the world was playing on the girl who expected nothing and was given less. My aunt gasped behind me. Your Majesty, surely you don't wish— He growled once, soft, deadly. She silenced instantly. I stood on trembling legs. The Alpha King didn't hesitate, didn't question, didn't request to see my face. He chose me sight unseen, the bride everyone rejected, claimed by the one man no one expected. And I had no idea why. But as his shadow fell over me, I felt the first crack in the cage I had lived in my whole life. Almost as if he saw something in me that no one else ever had, or as if he'd been looking for me all along. If I thought the night would end quietly, me returned to my aunt's carriage with the sour taste of rejection lodged in my throat, I was wrong. The moment the Alpha King's hand closed around mine, the entire hall inhaled as one. It wasn't a polite gasp, or a curious one. It was a sound of collective disbelief, the kind that cracks cleanly through the air, sharp enough to leave a mark. I wanted to pull away. I wanted to ask why, but my body refused to obey, suspended between dread and something else I didn't dare name. Kalian of the Night Spire pack stood beside me, taller than every guard in the room, cloaked in dark armor embroidered with obsidian thread. His presence felt like a storm wrapped in skin, contained, lethal, impossible to ignore. He wasn't supposed to be here, not tonight, not at the end, not for me. The Alpha King arrives late, someone murmured behind us. He wouldn't lower himself to choose a human bride. Then why her? Why me? I wanted to ask him the same thing. I was nobody, an unwanted girl from a minor household, a bride everyone had refused, a last pick that even political desperation couldn't justify. But Kalian didn't spare the room a single glance. His wolf-orange eyes stayed locked on me, unreadable beneath the crown that gleamed like forged night. He didn't lift my veil, didn't check my features, didn't examine me the way other nobles had, searching for a reason to say no. He simply held out his hand again, commanding, patient, final. Ilara, my aunt hissed from behind me, her voice cracking like ice. Do not embarrass us. He cannot possibly mean. A sound rumbled low in Kalian's chest, a warning growl. It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. Every living creature in the hall froze. Even the flames in the sconces seemed to retreat. My aunt fell silent so fast it was as if someone severed her voice with a blade. Heat flooded my cheeks under the veil, not from shame, but from the impossible reality pressing in around me. He chose me, sight unseen. I swallowed hard, but my throat felt raw. Your Majesty, the officiator stammered, stumbling forward, bowing low until his forehead nearly touched the floor. The selection ceremony concluded hours ago. The chosen brides have been escorted. Kalian raised a hand. The man shut up mid-breath. I will claim this one, he said, his voice calm, deep, and edged with the authority of someone who has never had a command questioned in his life. The hall erupted. Voices crashed together in a furious tide. Disbelief, outrage, curiosity, panic. She's the rejected one. No one wanted her. She wasn't even considered. He didn't lift her veil. What is he thinking? How can he make a political choice like this? I stood trapped in the center of a storm, A trembling figure wrapped in lavender silk and fear, clinging to nothing except the heat of Kalian's hand on mine. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I could feel my breath catching on the edges of every word thrown at me. Cursed, unfit, unworthy. I'd heard it all before, but never with this much venom. Never in front of a king. Kalian exhaled slowly, and the sound was enough to silence half the room. I forced myself to speak, to reclaim some tiny shred of control. Why me? The words slipped out before I could swallow them. He looked down at me then, and something shifted in his eyes. Not pity, not compassion, recognition. You'll understand soon, he said quietly, just for me. My heartbeat stuttered. That meant nothing, or everything. The officiator cleared his throat nervously. Your Majesty, if you wish to formalize the claim. Kalian didn't wait for guidance. He placed his hand lightly against my lower back, barely touching, but enough to send awareness curling through my spine, and guided me forward. Not forcefully, not possessively, just undeniably. I walked because my feet moved of their own will, because the hall felt too small around us, because the eyes of nobles and wolves and humans burned holes through my veil like fire through thin paper. Because I didn't know what else to do. The ceremonial platform loomed ahead, draped in dark silk and silver chains. The place where brides knelt, offering themselves for inspection and approval. A place I thought I'd never stand. Kalian stopped beside it, his presence radiating dominance, authority, and quiet purpose. He didn't push me down to kneel. He stepped in front of the platform and turned to face the crowd, bringing me with him, as though I wasn't here to be judged, as though I wasn't a last choice, as though I belonged at his side. He announced, voice resonant and final, Ilara of the Human Province will be escorted to Nightspire Keep as my chosen bride. The world seemed to tilt under my feet. The gasp that followed wasn't a sound, it was a detonation. I felt myself sway, dizzy beneath the veil, gripping the edge of my gown to steady myself. But Kalian's hand found mine again, steady, warm, grounding. I didn't understand him. I didn't trust this. I didn't believe for one moment that fate could change in a heartbeat. But disbelief didn't matter. The hall's outrage didn't matter. My aunt's stunned silence didn't matter. The Alpha King had spoken, and with a single choice, he swept me into a marriage I never expected, and a destiny I wasn't ready to face. I didn't see Kalian again the rest of the night. After he claimed me, the hall erupted into chaos, guards scrambling, nobles arguing, my aunt nearly fainting from the humiliation of it all. In the storm of noise and disbelief, the Alpha King simply turned, issued a single command to his captain, and disappeared through the massive obsidian doors without another word. Escort her at dawn, he ordered. And just like that, he was gone, not waiting for me, not speaking to me, not offering comfort or explanation. The king was a presence that struck like lightning, then vanished, leaving behind the crackle of something I didn't understand. By the time dawn light crept across the horizon, I was already seated inside a carriage flanked by 6 Nightspire soldiers. The wheels groaned beneath us as we rolled out of the human capital, the city shrinking behind us like a memory I wasn't sure I would ever see again. Kalian traveled ahead with his vanguard, swift riders, armored wolves, and a pace too brutal for a carriage to match. His convoy disappeared within the first hour, swallowed by the dark forest path that wound toward the Shifterlands. I was left trailing in his shadow, my hands tightened around the small wooden charm hanging from a leather cord around my neck. My mother had carved it when I was 12, a crescent moon marked with 3 small claw slashes. She told me it meant protection, strength, the idea that moonlight reaches even those who stand alone. I clutched it now, as though pressing my heartbeat against it. The shifters escorting me were cold, not hostile, not cruel, just distant. Their eyes flicked to me occasionally, then away, as though the sight of my veiled face was a puzzle they didn't wish to solve. We rode in silence for nearly 2 hours before the first whisper reached me. "The king has reasons." It came from the left, the younger guard with the scar across his lip. "Reasons he keeps to himself," another muttered, adjusting the sword at his hip. A third snorted, "Or he's desperate." My stomach tightened. They weren't trying to be cruel. They simply assumed I couldn't hear them over the creak of wheels and the rhythm of hooves. Or perhaps they assumed I didn't matter enough to shield their conversations. A rejected bride wasn't someone soldiers guarded out of loyalty, just duty. The carriage hit a bump, and I gripped the charm until the edges dug into my palm. Desperate, rejected, unfit. The words clung to my skin like burrs. I tried to breathe, but the veil brushed against my lips with every inhale. A constant reminder of the thing everyone believed defined me. The trees thickened around us as we moved deeper into the night spire passageway, towering pines blocking out sunlight, moss muffling the sound of hooves. Mist coiled low around the ground, swirling like ghostly fingers around the soldiers' boots. Night spire territory, shifterland. My heart thudded harder. No matter how many times I told myself I was not a prisoner, I couldn't shake the feeling of being carried towards something irreversible. The captain barked an order, and the escort tightened formation around the carriage. Through the slit in the curtain, I caught sight of a massive black wolf moving parallel to us, its eyes glowing faint amber in the dim forest light. Its gaze met mine for a fleeting moment, piercing through the thin veil like it wasn't there at all. I jerked back instinctively. The carriage jolted, and I hugged myself, curling inward, wishing for invisibility. Even though invisibility was the very thing that had made me small for most of my life. "Human bride," one soldier muttered under his breath. "Can she even handle Nightspire Keep? She won't last 2 weeks. They'll eat her alive in council." I flinched. The conversations were not meant for me. But they weren't hidden either. As if I were not someone with ears or fears, or a pulse that skittered at every careless judgment. My mother's charm warmed in my hands, or maybe my palms were simply sweating. I whispered to myself under my breath, just loud enough to hear over the wheels. "You survived? Worse." The memory flickered behind my closed eyes. The flash of fangs, the crushing weight, the burning pain across my cheek and jaw. The moment my world divided into before and after. The reason I wore the veil. The reason no man chose me. The reason I was the rejected bride. If the shifters knew the truth, if they knew the scars weren't just disfigurement but proof of an encounter I should have never walked away from, they might have seen me differently. Or maybe they would have feared me more. The carriage slowed as the forest began to thin. The air shifted temperature. Colder, sharper, dusted with the scent of storms and night-blooming moss. One rider approached the window. He didn't lower his gaze in respect. He didn't address me formally. He just spoke flatly. "We will reach the outer ridge by sunset." Then, after a beat, barely audible, "The king requested you arrive safely." The king requested, not demanded, not ordered. Requested. The word curled through me like warmth in the cold. I turned my gaze forward, toward the distant rise of blackened mountains, toward Night Spire, toward a future I did not choose, toward a king whose presence lingered even in his absence, and for the first time since the ceremony I wondered, was I walking into danger or destiny? By the time the carriage reached the gates of Night Spire Keep, the sun had vanished behind blackened peaks, leaving only streaks of dying red across the sky. It felt fitting, like the world itself had dimmed the light for my arrival. Night Spire was not a place built for softness or hope. Its walls rose like carved obsidian, jagged and sharp, as though daring anyone foolish enough to get close. And now, it was supposed to become my home. The guards escorted me through the courtyard, past towering wolf statues and flickering braziers that cast long shadows across the stone. A waiting attendant, stern, dark-haired, wearing the Night Spire crest on her sleeve, guided me into a side chamber to prepare. No one spoke to me unless necessary. No one offered comfort. No one looked directly at my veil. It was as if touching their gaze to me would stain their honor. "Hold still," the attendant murmured, fastening the intricate chains along the spine of the ceremonial gown. "The king asked that you be prepared with care." Her tone suggested she wasn't sure why. Neither was I. The dress they placed around my body was nothing like the soft pastels I'd worn in the human capital. This was Night Spire silk, layered black and shimmering silver, the fabric heavy but impossibly smooth. When I moved, the material caught the light like moonlit steel. The sleeves draped elegantly to my wrists, where black gemstones rested against my skin like cold drops of shadow. I looked regal, royal, terrifying, a bride carved from the night itself. And yet, underneath all of it, I was still hiding. My fingers trembled as I adjusted the veil over my face, ensuring every scar remained hidden. The habit was automatic now. An old instinct burned into my bones. The idea of revealing myself in a castle full of shifters sent panic clawing up my spine. "You may enter when the horns sound," the attendant said, stepping back. I nodded, though my throat felt tight. When the horns finally blared, a deep, echoing sound that reverberated through the stone walls, my heart nearly stopped. This was it, the wedding of shadows. I stepped into the corridor, the heavy train of my gown whispering across the floor, and walked toward the great doors. Guards pushed them open, and I entered the great hall of Nightspire for the first time. Silence fell instantly. I felt it crash over me like a chilling wave. Hundreds of eyes turned toward me. Nobles, soldiers, advisors, emissaries, wolves in human skin. The hall itself seemed carved from darkness. Onyx pillars twisted upward, silver banners draped like falling stars, torches burning blue-white instead of gold. And at the far end, on a raised platform beneath a crown-shaped arch of black iron, stood Kalian, the Alpha King. He was dressed in ceremonial armor plated with dark scales, a fur-lined mantle resting across one shoulder. His presence radiated power so thick it felt like gravity itself bent around him. Even across the hall, I felt the force of him, steady, watching, cauterizing. As I moved closer, his eyes followed me, unblinking, unreadable, predatory in their stillness. I took each step carefully, my breath shallow behind the veil. My palms sweated inside my gloves, but I kept my chin lifted, refusing to show the tremor shaking my legs. The gown's chains clicked softly, echoing like distant chimes in the silent hall. When I finally reached the platform, Kalian turned fully toward me. The crowd bowed immediately. It took me a heartbeat too long to realize he hadn't looked away from me even once. He descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate, the hall holding its breath. When he reached me, he towered above me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body through the armor. I expected him to lift my veil then, to reveal what everyone had feared, to confirm their doubts, to flinch or recoil or second-guess his choice. But he did none of those things. He simply extended his hand, not commandingly, not with arrogance, gently. "Alara," he said, my name low on his tongue, "take my hand." A shiver rolled down my spine. Not fear, not exactly. Something else, something sharper, something dangerously close to anticipation. I placed my hand in his, my fingers fitting awkwardly against his much larger ones. His thumb brushed the edge of my glove. A simple touch, yet it sent a spark up my arm, like heat blooming under cold skin. He led me toward the center of the hall, where the ancient night spire ritual would begin. The crowd parted in silence, watching us with eyes full of questions they couldn't yet voice. Kalian leaned slightly, closer as we walked. "You don't need to fear this place," he murmured, his voice meant for me alone. "Not while you stand with me." I didn't know if he meant it as reassurance or command, but for the first time since I arrived in this dark kingdom, I felt something break through the fear. Not comfort, not trust. Something far more dangerous. Hope. And it terrified me more than anything else. If my heartbeat had been loud before, now it was thunder. I stood beside Kalian in the center of the Night Spire Hall, the echoes of ancient vows rising and falling like distant waves. The ceremonial torches burned blue-white, their flames trembling as if they too could feel the tension coiled tightly within me. My veil remained in place. My last shield. My last lie. The officiator stepped forward, scroll trembling in his hands. "According to Night Spire tradition," he announced, voice cracking as every noble leaned in to hear, "the Alpha King may now look upon his chosen bride." The hall fell into total silence, my vision blurred for a moment, not from tears, but from the sudden surge of panic, a wave so strong it nearly buckled my knees. This was the moment I feared more than anything. Not the kingdom, not the wolves, not the unknown future, but the unmasking, the exposure of everything I had spent years hiding beneath layers of silk and shame. I could feel Kalian's eyes on me, steady, unblinking, unreadable. Then came the words, the command that sealed my fate. "You may now look upon your mate." The officiator stepped back. Kalian stepped forward, and I forgot how to breathe. His hand lifted slowly, slow enough that I felt every second press against my ribs like a stone. His fingers touched the edge of the veil, barely brushing my cheek through the cloth. His touch was warm, gentle, devastating. My pulse stuttered, my thoughts scattered. My body tensed like prey caught in the shadow of a predator. "Ilara," he murmured, so quietly only I could hear, "look at me." I wanted to obey. I wanted to flee, but I couldn't move. He lifted the veil. The fabric rose like a curtain, pulling away from my face, and the cold night spire air hit my exposed skin. Gasps erupted around the hall. Sharp, cruel, shocked. But I kept my eyes on Kalian. It was all I could do. Root myself in the one gaze I feared most. The torches cast silver light across my scars, jagged lines stretching across my cheek and jaw, pale against my skin, wounds that had healed but never softened. Some nobles flinched visibly. One whispered, "Moon, save us." Another choked out, "She's marked." I braced myself. For disgust, for pity, for revulsion, for the recoil I had spent years memorizing. But Kalian did none of those things. He froze. Not in horror, not in shock. In awe. Pure, absolute awe. His eyes widened, not with fear but with recognition, as though something he had been searching for had finally appeared before him. And then he whispered it. "It's you." I stared at him, confused. Me? What did he mean? The hall buzzed with whispers, confusion rippling like wind through leaves. No one understood. Not the nobles, not the advisors, not even the guards. But Kalian didn't look away. He stepped closer, his breath brushing the scar along my cheekbone. I felt warmth bloom beneath my skin, a sensation I wasn't prepared for. Like the world tilting, like gravity shifting toward him. I trembled. This was the moment I'd been bracing for my entire life. The moment a man, now a king, would see my true face and make his judgment. I drew a shaking breath. "Your Majesty," I whispered, my voice unsteady, I understand if you wish to reconsider, if you do not want. He cut me off with a look so intense my words simply died. Then, he bowed his head, slightly, softly, reverently, as if honoring me, as if my scars were not a curse but something sacred. A startled murmur swept through the hall. Even the officiator stumbled backward, unsure whether to continue. My chest tightened painfully. Why, why would you do that? I whispered, my voice cracking from shock. Kalian lifted his head slowly, his expression unreadable, but his eyes burned. Because, he said, voice low, I see you. 2 words, but they struck with the force of a storm. My breath caught in my throat. The hall blurred at the edges, the nobles' horrified and confused whispers fading into distant noise. For the first time in my life, someone looked at me, truly looked, and did not recoil. For the first time, someone didn't see a monster. He saw me. You don't understand what this means, I whispered, but it sounded weak, small, lost. His gaze softened, barely perceptible, but enough to send heat prickling across my skin. One day you will, he murmured. Emotion surged in my chest, shock twisting into confusion, confusion burning into something far more dangerous. A spark, small, unwanted, but unmistakably there. Hope. I lowered my eyes, unable to meet his intensity anymore. The veil was gone. The hall was watching. There was no hiding now. And yet, beneath the terror pulsing through my veins, something inside me whispered, maybe this king didn't choose wrong. Maybe he didn't choose blindly. Maybe, just maybe, he chose me for a reason. If I had expected to be claimed the moment the ceremony ended, swept into the king's arms and carried toward a fate I had never asked for, I was wrong. Kalian did nothing expected. The hall's whispers followed us like shadows as the officiator declared the union sealed. Nobles bowed stiffly. Some stared at my scars, others at the king, as if searching for answers they knew they would never be brave enough to ask aloud. Kalian offered me his arm. Not possessive, not demanding, just offered. I hesitated, because everything in me was still trembling from the moment he lifted my veil, but I placed my hand lightly atop his arm. Even that touch made my breath hitch. A ripple of shock passed through the room. He didn't seem to notice anyone else. His posture was rigid, protective, as he led me down the aisle and out of the great hall, leaving behind the echo of gasps and speculation. Once the doors closed behind us, the noise muffled into a distant roar. He didn't take me toward the bridal chamber prepared for the night. He took me the opposite direction, up a winding staircase, down a torchlit corridor, past guards who immediately stepped aside without question. He walked with purpose, not once loosening his grip on the thought that held me, not firmly, but securely, as though guiding something fragile through the dark. Finally, he stopped before an obsidian door carved with the night spire crest, a crescent moon framed by wolves. My private chambers, he said quietly. The words struck me like a physical blow. Private chambers, a space no one entered without invitation, a place where the king alone ruled. And now, he was bringing me inside. The room was vast and shadowed, alive with the crackle of a fire burning low in a black stone hearth. Furs draped over carved furniture. A balcony overlooked the mountains, where lightning flickered in the far-off clouds. It was the den of a king, a predator's sanctuary, a place built for power, not gentleness. And yet, the moment the door closed, Kalian stepped away from me, putting space between us. He didn't touch me, didn't demand anything. He simply turned toward me with that unreadable expression that both unsettled and anchored me. Ilara, he said, my name falling from his lips like a vow, sit with me. I lowered myself onto a couch draped with silver-threaded fabric. My hands folded tight in my lap to hide their shaking. He remained standing for a long moment, hands clasped behind him, chest rising and falling slowly, as if trying to steady some storm inside him. Finally, he moved to sit opposite me, elbows resting on his knees, gaze fixed on my face. Not my scars. My face. "Ilara," he said again, softer this time. "Who told you your face was something to hide?" His voice was gentle. Too gentle. It felt like it could split me open more easily than anger ever could. My throat closed instantly. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. No answer came. How could I explain? How could I put years of rejection into one sentence? The children who stared, the teachers who looked away, the men who recoiled, the aunt who told me daily, "Be grateful anyone tolerates your presence." How could I explain the way people's faces always changed, no matter how hard they tried to hide it? The way shame had become my second skin? I swallowed hard, eyes dropping. "I don't know how to answer that," I whispered. He exhaled slowly, as if fighting the urge to reach for me. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, fierce, and devastatingly sincere. "Ilara, no one in my kingdom shall shame you again." My breath stilled. My fingers tightened on the fabric of my dress. No one had ever spoken words like that to me. Not with conviction. Not with power behind them. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. He rose suddenly, not in anger, but in decision, and walked to the window. The night wind caught strands of his dark hair, lifting them like shadowed silk. "You think your scars make you less," he said quietly, "as if they diminish your worth." His hands curled at his sides. "Let them try to say that again in my presence." There was something raw in his voice, unfiltered, protective in a way that made my heart twist painfully. "I don't understand you," I whispered. He turned sharply, his gaze locking with mine, intense and unbreakable. "You don't need to understand me," he said, voice low. "You only need to know this. You came into my kingdom as a bride rejected by all others, but with me, you are not rejected." He took one slow step toward me, then another. "I have secrets, Ilara," he murmured, "and so do you, but I will never demand what you cannot give." My breath trembled at the edges. "So what do you demand?" "Nothing," he said, and that word, simple, impossible, shook me deeper than any touch. He lowered himself to one knee, not fully bowing, but close enough to make my throat tighten. "With me," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "you will never hide your face again." Hope, the most dangerous emotion. It flickered inside me like a candle struggling against the wind. And though I tried to smother it, it burned anyway, because for the first time in my life, I felt safe. And the safety terrified me more than any threat ever had. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My mind was still tangled in Kalian's words. "No one in my kingdom shall shame you again." They replayed over and over, soft but heavy, pressing into the cracks I had spent years building walls over. By the time dawn brushed lavender across the mountains, my pulse still hadn't settled. I sat curled in a chair near the hearth in his private chamber, wrapped in a cloak much too large for me, staring at the flickering flames as though they might reveal answers. Behind me, I felt him before I heard him, a shift in the air, a presence expanding to fill the room, not oppressive, not dangerous, just there, a constant, steady weight. "Ilara," he said quietly, "you should rest." "I can't." He didn't move closer. He simply crossed his arms over his broad chest and leaned against the balcony doorway, watching me with eyes that caught every shadow. "You're afraid." "Yes," I admitted, surprising myself, "but not of you." A strange emotion flashed across his face. Relief, maybe, mixed with guilt. He walked toward me slowly, as if giving me time to object. I didn't. When he reached the chair, he lowered himself to one knee, not bowing like before, but grounding himself, making us eye level. "Ilara," he said softly, "I did not claim you blindly." A knot formed in my throat. "You didn't even see my face." "I didn't need to." That made no sense. None. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Why me?" He held my gaze for one long, deliberate moment. Then he said the words that would change everything. "Your scars." My breath froze. Cold rushed through my limbs, a familiar instinct. Shame, dread, fear. The reflex of being exposed. He shook his head sharply as if sensing every thought spiraling through me. "No," he said firmly, "not the way you think. Not as flaw. Not as curse." He reached out, stopping just short of touching the marked side of my face. "Ilara, your scars are prophecy." My heart stumbled. "Prophecy?" My voice came out thin. "Of what?" He took a steadying breath, then spoke the words as though reciting something ancient. "There is an old legend passed through the Night Spire line, thousands of years old." His voice lowered, almost a growl of reverence. "The bride marked by the moon claw will save the king who walks in shadow." The fire crackled behind me, but the room itself seemed to go silent. "Save? Me?" I stared at him, unable to blink. "What does that mean?" He answered without hesitation. "It means I have been searching for you." My world tilted. "Searching," I echoed, barely audible. He nodded once, silver eyes gleaming like winter lightning. "For years, every territory, every alliance city, every border town, my scouts carried sketches, descriptions. A girl marked by 3 scars forming a crescent." My hand flew to my cheek, the shape I had long tried to hide, the pattern people mocked, whispered about. "You knew what my scars looked like before you ever saw me," I whispered. "I knew exactly," he said. The prophecy was clear, and when my advisor returned from the human territories with rumors of a veiled girl kept out of sight, unwanted, unchosen, he leaned closer, voice dropping. "I knew you were the one." My breath trembled out of me, hidden, not unwanted, hidden from kings, hidden from wolves, hidden from a destiny no one wanted me to reach. The truth landed with a force that shook me. My aunt, the academy, they weren't ignoring me. They were hiding me. Kalian's jaw tightened. Humans have known pieces of the prophecy for centuries. They feared the girl who could stand beside a shifter king. They feared what it would mean for power. My chest constricted as realization clawed up my spine. "They hid me," I whispered, voice breaking, "so no one would ever find me." Kalian nodded slowly. "Until I did." A wave of emotion surged through me. Anger, grief, disbelief, something fierce and fragile beneath it all. "So, all those years," I whispered, "all that rejection, it wasn't because I was unwanted." His voice gentled. "No, Ilara, it was because you were too important." My eyes stung. For the first time in my life, the memories looked different. Children who avoided me, teachers who looked through me, aunt who warned me to be grateful, nobles who refused my presence at the bride selection. They weren't dismissing me. They were guarding a secret they barely understood. Kalian lifted a hand, slowly, giving me time, and touched my cheek, fingers following the silvered lines with unhurried reverence. "The moon claw marks," he murmured, "rare, sacred, feared. The shape matches the ancient description exactly. The child of 2 worlds marked by fate, meant to stand beside a king whose bloodline walks in shadow." Shadow. The word chilled me. "What shadow?" I asked. His gaze darkened, not with fear but with something old and wounded. My own curse, he said quietly. The one the prophecy says you will break. Destiny thrummed between us, alive, terrifying, undeniable. My identity, everything I had believed about myself, shifted like fault lines rearranging beneath my feet. Not cursed, marked, not rejected, chosen long before either of us knew why. I swallowed hard. What happens now? Kalian rose slowly, eyes never leaving mine. Now, he said, stepping closer, we uncover the truth together. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what that meant. I was afraid of how much I wanted to believe him. By the time the morning sun filtered through the frost-glazed windows of Nightspire, my pulse had barely steadied. Kalian's revelation about the prophecy had shaken me so deeply that I felt hollow and full all at once, as if the person I'd always been had cracked open to make way for someone new. But the world did not slow for identity crises. I had barely finished dressing when a knock sounded at my chamber door. A guard bowed stiffly. His Majesty requests your presence at the morning meal. Requests, not summons. The distinction lodged somewhere beneath my ribs, unfamiliar and sharp. Still, dread twisted in my stomach as I followed him through the palace corridors. This would be my first appearance before the Nightspire court, not as an anonymous veiled bride or a prophecy whispered in the dark, but as Kalian's chosen queen. Chosen. The word felt fragile on my tongue. The hall was already full when I arrived. Nobles in dark wolf-gilded attire, warriors with amber-tinted eyes, courtiers in shimmering fabrics. Conversations dropped like stones when I stepped inside. Whispers rose in their place, thin and sharp. Look at her face. Disfigured. Human. A prophecy excuse. Unworthy. My vision tunneled for a moment. The air felt colder. I kept my eyes forward, refusing to shrink, though the old instinct pressed hard at the edges of my spine. Kalian was seated at the head of the long obsidian table, his posture straight and powerful. When he saw me, something in his expression softened. Only slightly, but enough that my breath steadied. He stood. Every noble in the hall froze. Come, he said, voice low and certain. The word wrapped around me like a cloak. I walked to him, aware of every stare cutting across my scars. He pulled out the seat beside his throne, the place reserved for a queen, not a guest. A fresh wave of murmurs rippled through the room. She sits beside him, as if she deserves it. Has the king lost his senses? I clenched my hands beneath the table, nails digging into my palms. The old hurt, years of being the whisper people didn't bother to hide, rose like a tide inside me. Kalian's jaw tightened. He heard them. Every single word. Breakfast was served. Spiced meats, dark berries, steaming bread, but I couldn't taste anything. My throat felt locked. The nobles' whispers grew bolder as if my scars made me deaf. Humans crumble under pressure. Perhaps a prettier replacement? Or at least someone whole. My breath hitched. Kalian stilled. The shift was so subtle, yet unmistakable. His shoulders rolled back, his spine straightened. His aura, the one that belonged to a king, an alpha, began to ripple through the hall like a storm wind. A noble further down the table leaned toward another with a sneer. Imagine, he scoffed, Kalian of Nightspire, forced to claim that when he could have. He never finished the sentence, because Kalian's hand slammed onto the table with enough force to make goblets jump and plates rattle violently. Silence fell like a blade. Every head snapped toward him. Even the torches seemed to flicker in fear. His eyes, they were not silver. They were gold. Burning, glowing, wolf-bright gold. When he spoke, his voice shook the air. Enough. The word reverberated through my bones. He rose to his full height, a presence so commanding the room seemed to shrink. She is my queen. My breath caught. Not bride, not obligation, not human curiosity. Queen. He swept his gaze across the hall, every noble cowering under the weight of it. Any man, he said, tone low and lethal, who suggests replacing her insults me, and Nightspire does not tolerate insults to its king. The noble who had spoken earlier went pale. Kalian took one step forward. Speak of her scars again, mock her again, and I will remove your tongue myself. A collective shudder rippled through the room. I sat frozen, the words echoing in my mind long after the hall had gone silent. She is my queen. Not ashamed, not dismissive, not flinching. Proud. When he returned to his seat beside me, he didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone pushed back the tide of whispers, swallowed them whole. But my heart was a storm. Fear still clung to me. Fear of their cruelty. Fear of my past. Fear of being seen too clearly. Yet beneath it, something fierce, something fragile, something blooming. Awe. Because for the first time in my life, someone stood for me. Not out of pity, not out of obligation, but out of conviction. When Kalian finally looked at me, his voice was softer, a stark contrast to the lethal command he had wielded moments earlier. No one, he murmured, will speak against you while I breathe. I swallowed hard, unable to trust my voice. Safety, real, undeniable safety, was a feeling I barely recognized. But suddenly, sitting beside him as the court trembled in silence, I realized something dangerous. Hope wasn't nearly as dead as I'd believed. I lasted 20 more minutes in the great hall before I couldn't breathe. The nobles had fallen silent after Kalian's outburst, but silence was not kindness. It was fear, thin and brittle, stretched over the same contempt that shimmered behind their eyes. I felt it every time someone's gaze slid toward my scars, then away, as if contact with them carried a curse. So when the musicians began their soft, eerie melody and the torches dipped low, I slipped out through a side archway and into the gardens beyond. The cold night air hit me like a blessing. Nightspire's gardens were nothing like the human estates I grew up near. They were wild, ferns spilling over black stone paths, twisted trees with silver-veined leaves, moonflowers that glowed faintly in the dark. Mist curled low around the ground, giving the whole place a dreamlike, otherworldly feel. Here, the stairs couldn't reach me. Here, my scars didn't echo. I wandered deeper, pulling my cloak tight until the hall's music faded into a distant hum. The moon hung low and full, casting pale light across the frost-touched bushes. For a moment, I let myself breathe. Just one moment. But even that was interrupted. Well, well, a voice drawled behind me. If it isn't the king's newest acquisition. I stiffened instantly. A tall noble stepped out from behind a column of stone ivy, smirking as though he had caught a rabbit in a snare. I recognized him, Lord Varric, one of the more vocal critics at the meal. His gaze slid over my face and lingered. The smile that twisted his mouth made my stomach turn. You should have stayed veiled, he said, circling me slowly. Spared us all the sight. My pulse spiked. I stepped back. He stepped forward. Truly, he continued, voice dripping venom. I almost admire the king's restraint. I would have banished you from the table for far less. His smirk deepened. But I suppose he'll tire of you soon enough. Heat shot through my chest. Shame, anger, fear all tangled. Leave me alone, I whispered. Oh? He leaned in, face inches from mine. I'm simply telling you what the others won't. You don't. His hand shot out, fingers clamping hard around my wrist. I gasped. Pain flared up my arm. Let go. You belong back where you came from, he hissed. Behind a veil. Behind a door. Out of sight. He never finished the sentence, because he was suddenly ripped away from me. One instant, his grip crushed my wrist. The next, he was slammed onto the ground so violently that the earth itself seemed to shake. A blur of black and fury landed beside him. Kalian. But not the composed king I had eaten beside earlier. This was a different version. Unstoppable, lethal, wolf-bright rage burning in his gold-lit eyes. His hand clamped around Varric's throat with terrifying ease. "Touch her again," Kalian growled. Not loud, but powerful enough that the leaves of the nearby trees trembled from the force of it. "Touch her," he repeated, voice a weapon, "and you die." Varric choked out a sound, half plea, half terror. Kalian didn't loosen his grip. The air seemed to thrum with danger, heat, and something primal. I could hardly breathe, not from fear of Kalian, but from the sheer force of protectiveness radiating off him. Finally, with a disgusted snarl, he shoved Varric away. "Leave," Kalian commanded. Varric didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled to his feet, tripping over his own cloak as he fled into the shadows, disappearing back toward the hall with a broken gasp. Silence returned to the garden. But Kalian remained deadly still, shoulders rising and falling with slow, controlled breaths. I waited for the rage to fade. Slowly. It did. His eyes dimmed from molten gold back to stormy silver. Only then did he turn toward me. "Ilara," he murmured, and the entire world seemed to quiet around my name. He stepped closer, slowly, carefully, as if afraid I would flinch. I didn't. He reached for my wrist, the one Varric had grabbed, and lifted it gently. His thumb brushed the reddened skin, a contrast so stark my breath caught. "No one," he said, each word deliberate and low, "puts hands on you." My chest tightened. "You shouldn't have to see this," I whispered. "See me. Like that." He shook his head, stepping even closer. "I don't want you hidden," he said softly, fiercely. "Not from them." His fingers rose, hesitating in the air for a breath before brushing the scar along my cheek. "And not from me." Something cracked inside me, thin armor splitting, letting light in where only shadows had lived. I didn't pull away. Couldn't. Kalian's touch was warm, reverent in a way that made my eyes sting. "Ilara," he said again, like a vow. "No one shames you in Nightspire. Not while I breathe." Fear melted. Relief rose. And beneath both, the beginning of something far more dangerous. Something achingly, terrifyingly hopeful. Kalian didn't let go of my hand as we left the garden. Not once. Not even when we passed guards who bowed so low their foreheads nearly brushed their knees. Not when we moved down the shadowed corridor where the torches flickered in nervous patterns. Not even when the moon rose higher, turning the palace windows to pools of silver glass. He held my hand like it was something steady, something important, something his. But he didn't speak again until we reached the far end of the palace, a staircase I had never seen, narrow and carved from obsidian marble. He led me upward, higher and higher until the air sharpened with cold. At the top, he pushed open an ironwork door and I stepped into a quiet overlook. The city of Nightspire stretched below us, glittering with rune-lit lanterns, the roofs crowned with frost, the cliffs below wrapped in mist. The moon hung full and steady above it all, casting light across the mountains like a blessing. I had never seen anything so stark and beautiful. Kalian stopped beside me, hands resting on the carved stone railing, but I could feel his attention shift from the city to me. "Ilara," he said quietly, "look at me." I did. The city's cold light hit his face, softening the sharp lines, turning his silver eyes into something almost human, almost gentle. "What happened to you?" he asked. Not a command, a question. One he had been waiting to ask since the moment he first saw my scars. My throat tightened. "I don't want to." "Yes," he interrupted softly, You do. For once in your life, tell someone the truth. His voice didn't push. It opened. As if the space between us was a place I could pour my secrets into without them drowning me. My hands curled against the railing, the cold bit into my palms. After the attack, I whispered, everything changed. His jaw tightened. They hid me, I said, breath trembling out, locked me away like a stain they didn't want seen. Kalian's eyes darkened. They punished me for surviving. The words fell from my tongue before I could take them back. They sounded uglier aloud, as if speaking them pulled the grime of the past into the present. My aunt told me the attack ruined my chances of marriage, that no man would ever want a girl with a face like mine. My voice shook. She said I should be grateful if someone even tolerated me. Kalian inhaled sharply, a sharp, dangerous sound. I wasn't allowed to attend festivals, I continued. They covered my mirrors. They made me eat separately. My nails dug into the stone rail. If I cried, they'd say I was selfish, ungrateful, that I should think of how hard they worked to manage the shame. A soft, broken laugh escaped me. Shame. That's what they called me. Kalian's reaction was immediate and terrifyingly quiet. His fingers curled into fists against the stone, knuckles whitening. The air around him seemed to vibrate, as if something inside him strained to break free. He didn't interrupt. He didn't look away. So I kept going, voice a whisper in the moonlit night. They didn't take me to healers. They didn't want anyone knowing what happened to me. They told me to stay veiled, that showing my face was disrespectful to them. My vision blurred. I blinked hard. And when the bride selection was announced, they said I should attend. Not because I had a chance, but because it would remind other girls how lucky they were. My lips trembled. I was there to be a warning, not a bride. For a long moment there was nothing but the sound of the wind. Then, they lied to you. His voice. Low, rough, tearing. I looked up, startled. Kalian stepped closer, the gold ring of his wolf glinting faintly in his eyes. They lied, he repeated, each word edged with quiet fury. To control you, to diminish you, to make you believe you were less when you were never less. My breath broke. He reached out, slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. His fingers tilted my chin upward, his touch gentle but unyielding. Ilara, he murmured, you survived something meant to destroy you. That alone should have made them fall to their knees in gratitude, not shame you. My eyes filled. I blinked, but the tears slipped free anyway. For the first time in years, crying didn't feel like weakness. It felt like release. Kalian brushed a tear with his thumb. Carefully, reverently. I see you, he whispered. The words hit harder than they should have, not because he said them, but because he meant them. I didn't realize how badly I needed someone to look past the scars, not ignore them, not flinch from them, but see me. I exhaled, shaky, fragile. Thank you, I whispered. His forehead lowered to mine, barely touching, breath warm against my cheek. You never needed their approval, he said, just the truth. And standing there, with the city glittering beneath us and his hands warm against my face, I finally let myself believe him. The night air on the overlook felt thinner after my confession, like the world itself was holding its breath. Kalian hadn't moved since he touched my cheek. He still stood close, close enough that when I breathed, I inhaled his warmth, his scent. Storm rain, pine, and something darker, something distinctly him. I should have stepped back. I didn't. His thumb brushed the corner of my jaw, then paused, as if he feared the next inch of movement might shatter the fragile thing forming between us. Ilara, he said, voice low, rough. May I touch you? My throat tightened. He had touched me before, cupping my face gently in the garden, guiding my chin upward on the overlook. But this was different. This was asking. This was permission. This was intimate. I swallowed. Yes. He exhaled. Barely. But the breath trembled. Like he'd been waiting for the answer far longer than I realized. His fingers lifted. Slow. Careful. Almost reverent as they traced the line of my jaw. I felt each brush like a spark against my skin. My breath caught when his other hand rose to hover beside my cheek. Here, he murmured, voice almost breaking, is where they told you to hide. My pulse pounded in my ears. He touched the first scar, lightly, as if he feared breaking me. My knees nearly gave out. He traced the second mark, the pale crescent curve carved years ago by teeth and claws. Alara, he whispered, these marks, I have dreamed of them. Dreamed? I couldn't breathe. Not from fear. From the weight of how he was looking at me. Not disgusted. Not pitying. Not gentle for the sake of gentleness, but reverent. Awed. As if my scars were holy things. He brushed the third scar, the one that arrowed toward my cheekbone. Heat shot through me. Not embarrassment. Not shame. Something else. Something I had never felt before. Desire. Not his. Mine. For the first time in my life, I wanted someone to touch me. He lifted my face gently, his thumb brushing beneath my jaw as though grounding himself. Ilara, he said again, voice barely audible. May I? He didn't finish the sentence, but I knew. He was asking if he could kiss me. My heart hammered so violently I thought it might crack my ribs. I whispered the only word I could manage. Yes. The world stopped. Or maybe I did. Because Kalian leaned in, but not toward my mouth. Instead, he angled his head and pressed a slow, careful kiss to the top of the first scar. My eyes fluttered shut. The contact was so soft, so reverent, that I felt tears pool in my lashes. No one had ever touched me like that. No one had ever dared. His lips moved to the second scar, a tender, deliberate kiss. My knees wobbled. His hand slid to the small of my back, steadying, protective, but not possessive. The third kiss landed just above my cheekbone. Heat shot through me so intensely I gasped. Alara, he murmured against my skin, breath warm and shaking. You are not something to hide. I didn't realize my hands had clenched the front of his tunic until he drew back just enough to look into my eyes. Silver and gold glowed in his gaze, his wolf pressing at the edges, barely leashed. Slowly, achingly slow, he lowered his mouth to mine. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't hungry. It wasn't claiming. It was gentle, searching, but full. A question and an answer. A promise and a plea. My body reacted instantly, heat curling low in my stomach, breath catching, fingers tightening in his clothes. I felt something inside me open, something I'd locked away for years, something that now reached for him without my permission. His hand slid up my spine, drawing me closer. My lips parted, instinctively seeking more. The kiss deepened. Not forceful, but impossibly tender, impossibly sure. The world rushed back in a dizzying wave. I felt alive, wanted, whole. Kalian suddenly broke the kiss, breath ragged, forehead resting against mine. His body trembled. Not with fear, with restraint. Alara, he rasped, voice rough and uneven. If I kiss you again. He swallowed hard. If I kiss you again, I won't stop. Heat flooded my cheeks because I knew what he meant. Not just more kissing, not just more closeness. He was warning me. For my sake, not his. I stayed quiet, heart pounding, breath shaking between us. He exhaled a slow, shuddering breath, pulling his forehead back just enough to look at me. I want you, he whispered. But on your terms. Your pace. His voice lowered, almost breaking. Not because the court expects it or because the prophecy demands it. My chest tightened with something that felt like a blooming ache. He wanted me. Not the prophecy, not the scars, not the role. Me. I trust you, I whispered, and the truth of it settled deep inside me, terrifying and steadying all at once. Kalian closed his eyes as if my words struck some part of him he'd kept guarded. Then, with more restraint than I could comprehend, he stepped back. Not far. Just enough to breathe. Then we go slowly, he said, voice hoarse. Because I intend to deserve every kiss you give me. My pulse fluttered. And under the moonlight, for the first time in my life, desire didn't frighten me. It felt like something I was finally allowed to feel. I should have expected it. After the kiss under the moon. After the way Kalian touched me like I wasn't a burden but a choice. The world should have crumbled in gratitude and bowed to some invisible shift in fate. But reality was colder than moonlight. The next morning, I walked into the outer gallery leading to the throne room, and froze. The Night Spire Council was already assembled inside, and they were shouting. Not debating, not discussing, shouting. Their voices ricocheted off the stone walls, sharp and vicious, carrying straight through the half-open throne room doors. "She is human," one roared. "Unfit for our king," snapped another. "A human bride will weaken our bloodline." Cursed, unworthy, dangerous. I didn't breathe. I pressed myself against the wall of the corridor, hidden behind one of the massive wolf-carved pillars. The voices blended together into a hateful storm. Bloodline, cursed, replacement. Each word landed like a slap. I should have left. I should have turned around and spared myself the pain. But my feet wouldn't move. Because beneath all those vicious voices, I heard a silence that scared me more. Kalian wasn't speaking. Was he letting them say these things? Was he reconsidering choosing me? Was I about to lose everything before I'd even understood what everything meant? I inched closer. Enough to see. Enough to hear. The council stood in a half-circle before the throne, faces red with fury, robes rippling like storm clouds. They argued over each other, hands slicing the air. "She is cursed. She bears moonclaw marks. She'll bring ruin. The prophecy is twisted. The king must choose another." My vision went blurry for a moment. Another queen, another bride. Another face he might kiss under the moon. Something inside me broke, and then went frighteningly still. My heart thudded painfully as another councilman spat. "She will end us. End Night Spire. End the bloodline. End the king. You must replace her." The word replace hit harder than I expected. After years of being the afterthought, the shame, the burden, I thought I had grown numb. But this wound sliced deeper, because losing Kalian, that thought hurt. It hurt so much I stepped back, breath catching, and then a sound ripped through the hall. Not from a councilman, from the throne, from Kalian. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. It rolled through the air like the beginning of an earthquake. "Enough." The council fell dead silent. Kalian rose from the throne slowly, deliberately, like a man choosing violence 1 inch at a time. His eyes were gold, glowing with a fury I had never seen before, not even in the garden. His wolf was right beneath the surface, unrestrained, lethal, ready to rip. One councilman, braver or more foolish than the others, tried again. "My king, you must see. She is not fit to—" Kalian bared his teeth in a silent snarl. "Speak her name again with contempt," he said, voice low and murderous, "and I will end this council myself." The temperature in the throne room dropped. The air tightened. Every councilman froze. I gripped the pillar to keep from sliding to the ground. Kalian stepped forward, eyes locked on the one who dared challenge him. One more insult, he growled. One more whisper. One more suggestion that I replace her. He leaned forward, voice cracking with raw volcanic rage. And I will consider it treason. A shudder rippled through the room. No one breathed. No one moved. The king had declared it. Insulting me was treason. Me, the human bride, the scarred bride, the curse they feared, the queen they rejected. Kalian wasn't protecting an asset. He wasn't defending a prophecy. He was defending me. A warmth spread through my chest, dangerous, fragile, aching. But that warmth cracked when the council bowed out. Too quickly, too stiffly. Not in agreement, in fear. And fear breeds rebellion. I watched their eyes as they backed away. Some furious, some calculating, some already plotting. Enemies weren't dissolving. They were forming. And Kalian, he was going to be their target. My breath caught painfully. They wouldn't attack me. I was human. Weaker. Less valuable. But him? The king who defied them. The king who broke tradition. The king who chose a bride they despised. He had become vulnerable because of me. Doubt twisted inside me. What if I was dangerous for him? What if loving me, wanting me, trusting me, put him at risk? What if the prophecy they feared was real in a way none of us understood? My hand shook on the stone pillar. Fear, not for myself, but for him, settled cold and sharp inside my chest. Because for the first time, I realized Kalian wasn't only fighting for me. He was fighting against his own world. And I wasn't sure his world would let him win. I couldn't stop thinking about the council's voices after they left the throne room. Their words stuck to my skin like ash. Heavy, suffocating, poisonous. Replace her. Cursed. End the king. Even when I returned to my chamber, even when Kalian came to check on me and brushed his thumb once across my knuckles, even when he murmured, "Ignore them," I couldn't. Because the fear I felt wasn't for me. It was for him. And that fear sharpened into something far worse when Elder Sarah arrived the next morning. She was one of the oldest wolves in Nightspire, hair silver as frost, eyes clouded by age but still fierce with magic. She rarely visited the throne unless summoned, but today she stormed into the chamber with urgency that chilled the air. Kalian stiffened immediately. "Elder, Your Majesty," she said curtly, bowing. Then her gaze slid to me. "We must speak. Now." Something in her tone made my stomach drop. Kalian stepped forward, placing himself slightly between us, so subtle most wouldn't notice, so instinctive that I did. "Say what you came to say," he ordered. Sarah looked at me again, and this time her eyes softened. Not with pity, with dread. "The prophecy," she said. "You only heard half of it." My heart lurched. "Half?" Kalian's jaw flexed. "Explain." Sarah lifted a thin, trembling hand. A faint glow pulsed in her palm. Moonlight magic, ancient and steady. The old scrolls were damaged centuries ago. We believed only one interpretation survived. Her gaze locked with mine. "The bride marked by the moonclaw will save the king who walks in shadow." My breath steadied for a moment. Save. That part I knew. Kalian had told me. But Sarah's next words turned my blood cold. There was a line missing, a line I found in the hidden archives last night. Kalian's aura snapped like a whip. "What line?" Sarah closed her eyes, voice trembling. "The marked bride brings salvation, or the king's destruction." A chill ripped through me. Kalian went utterly still, not breathing, not blinking, frozen. "What?" His voice was a quiet, dangerous thing. Sarah continued, hands clasped tightly as though steadying herself. "There are two possible outcomes. If the bond succeeds, the king lives. But if it fails, Her gaze shifted to Kalian, then back to me. His wolf will tear free, uncontrolled, unthinking, a beast of pure shadow. The world tilted. Sarah swallowed. If the king loses control beneath the full moon, the first person he will attack is the one whose bond failed. Me. My chest tightened painfully. He would come for me, not because he wanted to, because the prophecy demanded it. Kalian moved before I could process the weight of it, stepping in front of me fully now, shoulders broad and tense, aura flaring like a shield. No, he growled. She will not take part in the ritual. I stared at him. What? He didn't look at me. His eyes were locked on Sarah, silver bright and furious. I forbid it. But Sarah didn't back down. My king, the full moon is in 3 nights. If she doesn't complete the ritual, I don't care. His voice rose, cracking like thunder. She will not risk her life for a prophecy that should never have been hers. His words struck something deep inside me. Not prophecy, not fate, not destiny. He was afraid. For me. I stepped forward, ignoring the tremor in my hands. Kalian. He didn't turn. I moved around him until I stood in front of him, forcing him to look at me. Kalian. I repeated softly. His eyes flicked to mine. Burning. Raw. Terrified. Terrified for me. You will not do this, he whispered, voice barely holding together. I will not watch you die. Something inside me cracked, because for the first time, he wasn't protecting a queen, or a prophecy, or a political alliance. He was protecting me, all of me, my scars, my fear, my past, my heart. I reached up, placing a shaking hand against his chest. His breath caught. I won't die, I said. You could. His voice broke. Ilara, you don't understand what I become during the ritual. He swallowed hard. I won't be able to stop. I know, I whispered. That's why I won't let you face it alone. His eyes widened, pain and disbelief warring with something deeper. His hand closed around mine, trembling. Ilara, please. That word, please, shattered me. I stepped closer, forehead brushing his. Kalian, I breathed, you fought your council. You fight your own people. You fight your wolf every time they look at me with hate. A tear slid down my cheek. I didn't wipe it. I won't let you fight this alone. His chest rose sharply, breath ragged. The air between us felt alive, electric. That is not your burden, he rasped. It is. My voice steadied. Because you are. Silence, thick, trembling, sacred. He closed his eyes, pained. Ilara. I lifted his chin gently. I choose you, I whispered. Even if the prophecy doesn't. His breath broke. In that moment I felt it. The shift. The snap of something old. The stir of something new. Not destiny. Not prophecy. Not fear. Love. Quiet. Raw. Blooming like a bruise turning into light. And Kalian, for the first time since I met him, had no words. The cavern was colder than I expected. Cold enough that my breath turned to mist. Cold enough that the water in the sacred pool shimmered like liquid moonlight instead of reflecting anything earthly. The air hummed, an ancient vibration that pulsed through my bones, warning me that nothing happening here belonged to the human world. Torches lined the stone walls in a perfect circle, their flames twisting unnaturally, as if drawn by an invisible force. The full moon shone directly through a narrow crack in the cavern ceiling, a single beam of white light cutting through the darkness like a blade. This was the place where kings were bound to their wolves, and tonight, where Kalian would be bound to me, or broken by me. I tried not to look at him as we stepped into the water together, but my eyes betrayed me. Kalian moved like a man fighting himself with every breath. His muscles were tense, jaw clenched, eyes shadowed with something primal and terrified. Not fear of the ritual, fear of hurting me. Ilara, he said quietly, voice rougher than I'd ever heard it. If something feels wrong, if you feel pain, you must step back. No, I whispered. His jaw tightened. Ilara. I said no. His breath shuddered, and for a moment something like anguish crossed his features. We knelt across from each other, knees touching beneath the glowing water. My dress fanned out around me like ink. His hands trembled as he lowered them into the pool, runes carved in the stone beginning to glow white-hot beneath the surface. The air thickened, the prophecy stirred, and Kalian's wolf awakened. It began subtly, his pupils dilating until the silver vanished, replaced by molten gold. His breathing deepened, chest rising and falling too fast. A low growl rumbled from deep within him, vibrating the water between us. Then, his head jerked sharply, his spine arched, his fingers dug into the stone beneath the water hard enough to crack it. Kalian, I breathed. He didn't hear me. His wolf did. The transformation ripped through him violently, fur bursting along his arms, claws tearing through skin and bone, teeth lengthening. His face contorted, eyes burning brighter, wilder. The sound of his snarl shook the cavern. And then his wolf, massive, black as shadow, eyes blazing gold, towered over me in the water. It snarled directly at me, not the way Kalian snarled at threats. This was different, instinctive, ferocious, uncontrolled. Sarah was right. If the bond failed, I would be the first he killed. My heart hammered. My body screamed at me to run. But something deeper, something older, held me still. I rose slowly from my kneel until the water lapped at my waist, step by step moving closer to the wolf that was supposed to destroy me. Ilara! Sarah's voice echoed from behind the runic circle. Step back. Even the torches seemed to recoil, but I didn't retreat. I stepped closer. Kalian's wolf snarled again, teeth bared, saliva dripping into the water. The force of it rippled across my skin. I took another step. I am not afraid of you. The cavern hushed. His wolf roared, a sound of rage and pain and something ancient, but I didn't stop. I moved until his breath fanned across my face, hot and wild, lifting the strands of my hair. Ilara! Sarah screamed. He will tear you apart. No, I said softly. He won't. My hand lifted, trembling but certain. Kalian's wolf lunged, but stopped a breath away, every muscle locked, as if something invisible held him frozen. His muzzle hovered inches from my palm, nostrils flaring, eyes blazing with conflict. I touched him. My fingers pressed to the warm, coarse fur of his muzzle. The instant I did, light exploded. Not from the wolf, not from the runes, from me, from my scars. They glowed. No, burned, with pure silver light, tracing along my cheek like liquid moonfire, across my jaw, down my neck. The glow spread into the water, igniting the runes until the entire cavern blazed with radiance. The wolf jerked as if hit by a bolt of lightning. His eyes widened, not in fury, in recognition. A deep rumbling whine broke from his throat, pain and surrender intertwined. The light intensified, wrapping us both in blinding brightness. Then, with a shudder that rippled the water, Kalian's wolf began to dissolve back into him, shifting slowly, painfully, beautifully. Fur melted into skin, claws into hands, teeth into human form. Until Kalian knelt before me in the sacred pool, naked, trembling, breath ragged, but whole. For the first time, whole. His chest heaved, water dripped from his hair. His eyes, no longer gold or silver but some luminous blend of both, locked onto mine. Ilara. His voice cracked, raw and reverent. You saved me. My breath trembled. I cupped his face with glowing hands. You found me, I whispered. I only followed the path back to you. His forehead pressed to mine, his breath warm and uneven. The runes dimmed, the torches steadied, the prophecy stilled. And in the sacred pool beneath the full moon, Kalian and I became bound, not by fear, not by fate, but by choice. The next morning, Nightspire felt different, not quieter, not calmer, just waiting. As if every stone, every flickering torch, every wolf-blooded noble sensed that something monumental had shifted beneath their feet. Whispers echoed through the halls as I walked, the kind that used to sting, the human, the scarred girl, the cursed bride. But now they carried a thread of something new. Fear, curiosity, uncertainty. Because everyone had seen the moon. Everyone had felt the surge of magic that shattered the night. Everyone had witnessed Kalian emerge from the sacred pool reborn. And everyone knew I was the reason. The guards opened the throne room doors as Kalian and I entered. My heart hammered, but I did not step behind him. Not this time. He didn't let me. His hand slid into mine as we crossed the threshold, the simple touch grounding me in a hall filled with nobles who had once wished me gone, broken, erased. The council, the generals, the high families, they were all there. Rows of elegant, sharp faces turned toward us. No one spoke, no one bowed, no one knew what would happen next. Kalian strode forward with a confidence I'd never seen so unrestrained, a king fully aligned with his wolf and his fate. The throne room's moonlit windows glimmered across his dark hair and carved armor, making him look both ancient and newly forged. I followed beside him, not a step behind. And for the first time, walking through that hall, I did not bow my head. My scars caught the light like silver threads, not marks of shame, marks of prophecy, marks of survival. I felt them glow, faintly but undeniably, as though the ritual's magic still lingered beneath my skin. The nobles noticed. Their gazes sharpened. A few stepped back. Kalian reached the center of the hall and turned to face the court. His voice carried through the cavernous chamber with an authority that made even the torches flare. "Nightspire," he said, "bear witness." Every spine stiffened. He lifted my hand, slowly, deliberately, and brought it forward. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. His other hand brushed my wrist. Warm, steady. A soft glow ignited beneath his touch. Not from me, from him. Magic pulsed from his fingertips, deep, ancient magic only a reigning king could wield, and etched itself into my skin in a delicate spiral of silver and black. The king's sigil, the emblem of Nightspire royalty, a bond visible to all, a mark no one could challenge. Gasps filled the hall. Feet shuffled. A councilman audibly choked. My breath caught as the sigil settled over my skin, warm like a heartbeat. Kalian held my wrist up for all of them to see. "This," he said, voice sharp enough to carve through marble, "is my queen." Silence fell. Heavy. Terrified. Awed. He stepped closer to me, not in front of me, not shielding me, beside me, with me. "Chosen by prophecy," he continued, "and by my heart." My chest tightened painfully. His heart. He didn't look at the nobles when he said it. He looked at me. Something deep inside me cracked open at the weight of it. Not fear, not disbelief, something softer. Braver. Something that recognized what it meant for a king to say such a thing before his court. Before those who already doubted him, before those who plotted against us. Love had many shapes. This was one of them. The nobles glanced at one another, panic flickering in their eyes. No one spoke. No one dared. Not after last night. Not after seeing him shift uncontrollably and return whole only after I touched him. Not after realizing the prophecy they feared was fulfilled. Kalian let the silence stretch until it trembled. Then he said, low but lethal, "If any of you challenge her now, you challenge me." A shiver rippled through the room. The council, those proud men and women who had demanded I be replaced, lowered their gazes. One by one, then in clusters. Heads bowed, knees dipped. Not to me. To us. Kalian released my wrist only long enough to take my hand again and guide me up the steps to the throne. My breath faltered. He seated himself. Then he turned, held out his hand, waiting, inviting, claiming. I took it. I stepped up beside him, not behind, not below, beside. He drew me into place where a queen should stand. A hush fell as I lifted my chin, letting the moonlight hit my scars. I felt no urge to hide, no flicker of shame. The hall that once swallowed me whole now reflected back a version of myself I had never imagined. Strong, steady, chosen. Kalian's fingers brushed mine as he leaned in just enough that only I could hear. "You are my queen," he whispered, "in every way that matters." The words wrapped around me like armor, and as I faced the court, the people who once dismissed me, I realized that I was no longer the rejected bride hiding behind a veil. I was the woman who survived, the bride of prophecy, the queen who stood beside the king reborn. And they bowed to me, for the first time in my life. I was truly seen. It's strange how quickly people learn to bow. Weeks ago, I walked these halls with my head lowered, my veil tight against my skin, every step shadowed by whispers I pretended not to hear. I had been the girl no one chose, the bride offered last, the one they muttered about like a curse they couldn't shake off. Now, when Kalian and I enter the grand hall of Nightspire Keep, the same nobles who once recoiled from me drop to their knees without hesitation. The sound is a soft rustle, hundreds of robes brushing the floor at once. It takes everything in me not to stop walking, because the instinct is still there. The instinct to make myself smaller, invisible, unseen, to hide behind fabric and silence. But I don't. Not anymore. My veil stays folded in its box, untouched for weeks. Tonight, I walk beside Kalian with my face uncovered, silver scars catching the glow of moon crystals strung across the high vaulted ceiling. They shimmer faintly as I move, as though the ritual still breathes beneath my skin. The hall is alive with music, wolf-blooded magic thrumming beneath every surface. Noble families line the sides, warriors stand alert on the outer edges, and foreign emissaries, humans, shifters, hybrids, watch with wide, calculating eyes, but no one speaks. The hush that follows us is different from before, not cruel, not mocking, awed. Kalian slows his stride. He always does when he senses my heart quicken, and squeezes my hand lightly, guiding me toward the head of the hall where the moonlit throne sits waiting. But before we reach it, I hear the first whisper. Soft, reverent, disbelieving. "The rejected bride," another voice answers breathless, "became the king's fate." The words ripple outward like a stone dropped into still water, carried, repeated, reshaped as they pass through the hall. The king's fate. Chosen by prophecy. She saved him under the moon. She healed his curse. She was the one. Each whisper wraps around me like a memory rewriting itself. Kalian hears them too. I know he does, because his fingers tighten around mine in a way that feels almost possessive, almost grateful, almost proud. We reach the first marble step of the throne, and before I can ascend, Kalian turns toward me, not to the court, not to the world, to me. The hall holds its breath. He leans in, lowering his head so his lips brush the shell of my ear. His voice is warm, deep, threaded with something that makes my breath catch every time I hear it. "You were never unwanted," he murmurs. A shiver runs down my spine. He tilts his head slightly, his nose grazing my cheek, his tone softer still. "You were meant for me." My throat tightens, not with fear but with something gentler, something steady. something that feels like standing in moonlight after a lifetime beneath shrouded clouds. I turn to look at him fully, taking in the man who was once a rumor, a shadowed king feared by his own council. The man whose wolf nearly destroyed him. The man I touched in the sacred pool and brought back whole. Kalian, my husband, my king, my destiny, and somehow, I am his. When I lift my chin, the entire hall sees my scars fully. Silver crescents glowing like pieces of the moon etched into my skin. Not hidden, not shamed, not dismissed. Celebrated. I take the final step up beside him as the king's sigil on my wrist warms, glowing faintly beneath the lantern light. The mark he gave me. The mark that tells the world whose queen I am. Beside me, Kalian settles into his throne, then reaches for my hand and places it on the carved armrest of the queen's seat. Firmly, deliberately, as if claiming a truth for all to witness. The courtiers bow again, this time deeper, surer. As they rise, I see no mockery, no pity, no doubt, only respect. Kalian leans closer, his voice brushing my skin like a vow sealed in breath. Nightspire bows to you, Alara. My heart swells, painfully, beautifully. I smile, a real smile, unhidden, unguarded, unfolding like dawn breaking over snow. The kind I never thought I would give anyone, much less an entire kingdom. The whispers shift again. The bride who became destiny. The queen who saved the king. The scars of the moon. And for the first time, the words don't hurt. They heal. Because I am no longer the rejected bride standing behind a veil. I am the woman who walked through prophecy, touched a monster, and came away with a king. I am Alara of Nightspire, uncovered, unafraid, unbroken. My silver scars shine like threads of moonlight. And Kalian, my fierce, impossible king, sits beside me, his hand warm against mine, his gaze steady with a promise that still steals my breath. Together, we face the hall. Together, we face whatever comes next. Because destiny didn't choose him alone. It chose us.